What's up, guys? I have been given another comic book challenge from my friend Brevon, and he has challenged me to read Marvel Comics' Daredevil Born Again. If you'll recall, if you've seen my channel before, you know that I have covered the previous Daredevil comic, Man Without Fear. And this one, by Frank Miller and David Mazzuchelli, covers Daredevil numbers 226 to 233. And I will say this first of all, this story has got to be one of the darkest Daredevil stories told that I've read thus far. And my God, I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to be able to top it, except for maybe Man Without Fear, but that's like Daredevil's origin story. This shows Daredevil at his lowest point. So, during the course of this comic, we watch as Matt Murdock, who is already on the verge of a nervous breakdown, losing his home, his job as a lawyer, and even his secret identity as Daredevil. We see him just about lose everything, his friends, his mind even at that point. And how does this happen? His former lover, Ellen, sells him out, and I cannot make this up. She sells out his secret identity as Daredevil for another fix of drugs. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, when I realized this, I was beyond pissed. Because you have essentially just given away someone's identity, someone's very life, all for a fix of another drug. So what happens here? Well, her actions lead to consequences for Matt. Because once the kingpin of crime finds out about who Matt Murdock is and how he is connected to Daredevil, he wastes no time in making Matt Murdock's life a living hell. During the course of the comic, we find out from Matt Murdock that the IRS freezes his bank accounts, he loses his job as a lawyer under false accusations of crimes that he did not commit from a formerly honest cop who has sold him out for the money to provide for a surgery for his dying son. Not only this, but he loses the apartment that he lives in, and he is forced to watch as the gym that he goes to is just completely burned to the ground by a bomb planted by the Kingpin. Because of this, Matt is launched into an absolute rage. Like at one point, he goes to confront the Kingpin, and he knocks the crap out of him. Like he actually breaks the Kingpin's nose before Kingpin himself knocks Matt out, locks him up in a car, and throws him down at the bottom of a lake to be killed. And all I could think to myself is, Jesus Christ, this story has no slowdown point whatsoever. It is just going and going and going down a steep, dark spiral. And we see Matt himself on the verge of both a nervous breakdown as well as a nasty fever. We see him at one point actually getting shanked by someone dressed up like Santa Claus, which that alone is a bit of a messed up idea to see, especially on the printed page, but I digress. During the course of this, Matt actually manages to stumble his way back to Hell's Kitchen, the place that he grew up in New York City. And we actually see him finding the old gym that his father used to work out at when he was a boxer, and when his father was still alive. And we also find out that this is Matt's secret training spot in Hell's Kitchen. But we actually get a very decent surprise when we actually get to meet Matt's mother. Because during a flashback, when Matt is stuck in the hospital after he's just been blinded, all of his senses are overwhelming him from how sharp they have become due to the radioactive material that has blinded him. He gets a visit from an older woman, and during this time he actually feels a cross necklace. Later on, he is found by the church and held up by a nun, and when he goes to feel for the necklace, he realizes that this might be the same cross that he had felt when he was a child. During this time, he actually asks the nun, "Are you my mother?" And she responds with, "Of course not." But then we get a surprise from Matt. Because of his heightened senses, he can actually hear the heartbeats of others. And when he hears this woman's heart jump just a little bit, he realizes that she has just lied to him, that this is in fact his mother. His biological mother, as far as I know. But me being essentially new to Daredevil comics, I don't know that much, but this just seemed like such a surprise revelation to me. Not only this, but anyone who has been friends with Matt has come under fire by the Kingpin. And let me tell you right now, the Kingpin has just been absolutely ruthless. Like, I remember seeing him in the Man Without Fear comic, and he seemed pretty intimidating. But this, we see just how much his obsession with essentially destroying Matt Murdock leads to him losing respect in his subordinates, and as well as also losing his grasp upon his resources. We see how far his reach goes, how far the Kingpin reaches. He's even made contracts not just in the business world, but into the military alone. Hell, do you want to know something? In the last few issues of the comic, we actually see the Kingpin hire a failed super soldier from across at Vietnam, it looks like, or another foreign war zone, pulls them back to America, and tells them that Matt Murdock is the enemy of his country. And during this time, Matt is relentlessly pursued by this man. Only guess who pops up? The original super soldier. We actually get to see the Avengers pop up in this Daredevil comic, which I thought was actually pretty damn cool. We get to see the old Iron Man, we get to see Captain America, hell, even Thor. Which I gotta say, I did not expect that in this kind of comic. Because to me, Daredevil is part of the main Marvel universe, but he also seems to stand outside of it, just because his stories are not for the faint of heart. But I will say this much. Whilst I was reading this Daredevil comic, I could not help but to wonder if Matt himself would ever snap, or if one day he'd just absolutely lose his mind and just give up. But throughout it all, we see Matt persisting. We see his absolute refusal to die. And I can wholeheartedly respect that. That will to keep going, that will to drive on, despite all the overwhelming odds against you. Despite the fact that you are literally on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Jesus. Like I said, this comic goes hard throughout all of it. Not to mention, we also see Ellen herself. We see how she is reflecting on her actions of how she has essentially sold Matt out, and she regrets it wholeheartedly. And I honestly thought, so, you regret it now that you sold him out for a freaking extra fix? Only for her to wind up with an abusive boyfriend who helps to transport her back to America. But at the same time, he wants to control her, because he himself was a fan of Ellen back when she was doing movies. And we see Ellen just struggling, trying to find Matt in a way to, I guess, apologize or to rekindle their old relationship. Because despite everything that has happened, Matt has been the only one who has protected her. And thus, she cries out for his name, despite knowing the fact of the overwhelming guilt that she has sold him out for another fix. And at one point, we actually do get to see Matt and Ellen reunite. And it was honestly just a very sweet moment, because despite the fact that Ellen was essentially confessing, I sold you out for another fix of drugs, he just lets it go. He chooses to let it go and just embraces her, knowing that he has found a familiar face. Now, as for the art style throughout this whole comic, the story itself was very well done, very well written. I can easily see this being a nice little small, like, handwritten novel. But the art style really brings this comic to life with its nice gritty artwork, as well as very odd coloring choices at times. Like, I'm not joshing because this is like maybe 90s or 80s of a comic, but at the same time, the artwork does it justice. I sometimes feel like some of the older comics always have this like much grittier and much nicer looking art style compared to what we have today, which is also very nice, but it's far too polished. Daredevil is rough, it's dark, and the art style that is used here by Frank Miller and Mazzuchelli is just fantastic. So all in all, I would highly recommend checking out Daredevil Born Again if you're just in the mood for a dark story of a man being pushed to his limits as his life spirals further and further out of control, only to try to find hope in the darkness, or if you're just a Daredevil fan and want to see a new comic to check out. I will leave that up to you. Anyways, you guys, thank you once again for listening to this crazy man's ramblings. And Brevon, I honestly enjoyed the challenge of checking out another Daredevil comic, so I must thank you for that. Anyways, you guys, if you're curious, I have also covered other random comics that are non-DC in the playlist that will soon pop up here. But if you have any others you want to check out, feel free to either subscribe, leave a like, or leave a comment down below, especially if you've got another comic challenge for me. Anyways, you guys, thank you so much for listening. This is Rambling Collector signing off. Happy reading, everybody.